Recently, I've been faced with a situation I can't ignore anymore. 6 months ago, I met Adam at a bookstore. It wasn't one of those love at first sight moments. We just happened to bump into each other while browsing the same shelf and started chatting about books. Before long, we were talking about everything. Life, work and random things that made us laugh. Adam was easy to talk to, funny, and seemed like someone who had his life together. He didn't have kids, never been married. At first I thought maybe that was a good thing. No baggage, no complicated history, just two people getting to know each other. We spent hours talking that day, and before I knew it, we were texting and calling almost every day. Our relationship felt like it was moving quickly, but I liked how easy it was with him. He made me feel like maybe this time I'd found someone who could truly make me happy. As the days turned into weeks, Adam and I grew closer. We talked for hours, sharing everything from silly childhood memories to deep, heartfelt moments. I was beginning to fall for him, and it felt so easy. There was a warmth about him that made me feel safe, something I hadn't experienced in a long time. Adam was funny, kind, and seemed to genuinely care about getting to know me. He was different from anyone I had met before. He had never been married, and that made me curious. I wondered why someone as charming as him didn't have a past filled with relationships. He told me, with a hint of sadness, that he had only been in a few serious relationships before. He had loved deeply, but for one reason or another, they hadn't worked out. He didn't go into much detail, and I didn't press him on it. I assumed everyone had their own history, their own heartbreaks. It was only natural. One day, as we sat on the porch of the small apartment we had rented together, Adam started talking about a girl named Isabelle. I didn't know what to expect, but his tone changed when he mentioned her name. It wasn't the casual mention of an ex, but something deeper. His eyes looked away, and he paused, as if the memories of her had suddenly rushed back. She was my first love, he told me, his voice soft, almost distant. We were so young. I was 19, she was 18. We thought we were going to be together forever. I didn't say anything at first. I let him talk. I didn't want to interrupt the flow of his words, but a part of me felt a strange weight in my chest. I could tell she had meant a lot to him, maybe too much. She left me when I joined the army, he continued, his fingers nervously tapping on the armrest. I tried to get her to wait for me, but she couldn't. She moved on. I never really understood why. There was a long pause before he added, she was the one. But sometimes the timing just isn't right. We had our moment, and it was over. She moved on, and I never really did. He glanced at me, his eyes searching mine, as if looking for understanding. I'm not saying I regret it, but sometimes I wonder what could have been. I didn't know how to respond. Part of me felt for him. He had clearly been hurt by Isabelle's departure, but another part of felt a little uneasy. Was this just a story he told everyone? Was I the one who was supposed to fill the space left by Isabelle? I chose not to voice my concerns. I didn't want to seem insecure, especially not this early in the relationship. But the more Adam talked about Isabelle, the more I realised she was still very much in his life, whether she was physically present or not. He would mention her every now and then, in passing, like she was still a part of his world. The way he spoke about her made it clear that she had a special place in his heart, one that I wasn't sure I could fill. One evening, we were having dinner at a small cafe when Adam brought up Isabelle again. He started asking me questions about her. "I wonder where she is now," he said, staring off into the distance. "Does she have kids? Is she still living in the same town?" He asked more questions, but it didn't feel casual. It felt like he needed answers, like he couldn't stop wondering about her life. I didn't know what to say. I felt a pang of jealousy, though I tried not to show it. I didn't want to be the jealous girlfriend, but hearing him talk about her like that made me feel small, insignificant. I told myself I was just being silly. After all, Adam had reassured me that he cared about me. He hadn't given me any reason to doubt him, but there was something about the way he held on to her memory that made me feel like I wasn't enough, like I was just a temporary chapter in his life, while Isabelle was a story he couldn't let go of. For a while, I pushed these thoughts to the back of my mind. I wanted to believe that what Adam and I had was real. I wanted to believe that I was enough for him. But the more he spoke about Isabelle, the more I couldn't shake the feeling that his heart wasn't fully mine. I was starting to wonder if it ever really could be. As the days passed, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't quite right. Adam and I had built a solid connection, but lately I felt a distance between us that I couldn't explain. He wasn't as attentive as he used to be. He'd still smile, still say all the right things, but there was a lack of warmth in his eyes. It was subtle, but it was there, and I couldn't ignore it. I started noticing little things, small changes in his behaviour that I couldn't quite put my finger on. He'd be lost in thought, staring out the window, as if he was somewhere far away. He wasn't as talkative as before. When we sat together, there was often silence between us, something that hadn't been there in the beginning. One afternoon, while we were having lunch, I asked him outright, "Adam, is everything okay? You've been kind of distant lately." I tried to sound casual, but I couldn't hide the worry in my voice. He looked at me, a bit surprised, and then quickly shrugged. "It's nothing really, just work stuff. I've been stressed, that's all." But I didn't believe him. Something felt off, and it wasn't just work. It was something deeper. His response was too quick, too rehearsed. He wasn't opening up to me the way he used to. It was as if there was a wall between us now, and I didn't know how to break it down. The next evening we decided to go for a walk in the park, just to get some fresh air and clear our heads. As we walked, I tried to bring up the conversation again, this time more carefully. Adam, I've been thinking about what you said about Isabelle. I started. It feels like she's still on your mind sometimes. Like you're not really here with me, but somewhere else. He stopped walking and looked at me, his face hardening slightly. What are you trying to say? His voice was tense, and I could tell he wasn't happy with where the conversation was heading. I don't know, Adam. I just feel like I'm not really enough for you. You talk about her a lot, and it feels like you're comparing me to her, I said, my heart racing as the words tumbled out. He looked away, his jaw tightening. For a moment, there was silence between us, the tension thick and heavy. Finally, he spoke, but his voice was quieter than I expected. I'm not comparing you to her, but some things you can't just forget. I stood there, unsure of what to say next. His words hit harder than I anticipated. He wasn't just remembering her, he was still holding on. And in that moment, I realised that no matter how much I cared for him, I might never be the one to truly fill the space she left behind. The real turning point came on New Year's Eve. Adam, Lucy, and I went to the city centre to watch the fireworks and celebrate the holiday together. It was supposed to be a fresh start, a way to ring in the new year as a family. But as we walked through the crowded square, Adam suddenly stopped in his tracks. I looked over at him, and he was staring across the square, his eyes locked on a woman. At first, I didn't understand what was happening. Then I realised who she was. Isabelle. She was standing there with her husband, and Adam was staring at her with such intensity, like he couldn't take his eyes off her. I felt a knot form in my stomach. It was like I wasn't even there. Lucy was holding my hand, and I tried to stay calm, but the situation was so awkward. Adam didn't say anything. He just stood there, lost in thought, while I felt a strange emptiness between us. After a few minutes, he turned and walked away without saying a word. The rest of the night was uncomfortable, and when we got home, Adam was distant. He barely spoke to me. It was as if that moment with Isabelle had put a wall between us. Over the next few days, things didn't get better. Adam was distant, and every time I tried to talk to him, he would either avoid the conversation or get defensive. I started to question everything. Was I just a placeholder in his life until Isabelle came back? Why did he keep asking about her, talking about her, looking for information about her? I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't really enough for him. The more I thought about it, the more I realised I couldn't live in her shadow forever. I deserved someone who would choose me every day. Someone who wouldn't always look back to the past. One evening, after putting Lucy to bed, I sat down with Adam and asked, "Do you still think about her? Do you still love Isabelle?" He got defensive, angry even. "You're imagining things," he said. "I love you." But I didn't believe him. I didn't feel loved. know that I was the one he wanted, not someone who was just filling a gap. I couldn't keep comparing myself to his past. So I asked him, "Do you want to be with me, or do you want to go back to Isabelle?" He looked at me, confused. "What do you mean?" "I love you." But the words didn't feel real. I didn't feel loved anymore, not in the way I deserved. And so I made the hardest decision of my life. I told him I couldn't do this anymore. I couldn't live with someone who wasn't fully there. I packed my things, took Lucy's hand, and left. It was painful, but I knew it was the right choice. I couldn't keep living in the shadow of his first love. I needed someone who would choose me, someone who loved me completely. And while it was hard, I knew that it was time for me to let go of the past, just like Adam needed to. If you like my story, don't forget to like, share and subscribe. Thanks for reading.